But I trace this back to something more simple. I'm sure many of you disagree with me, but I trace it back to taking prayer out of schools in the 60s. Here's what that prayer was. It was very innocuous. Almighty God, we acknowledge our dependence upon Thee, and we beg Thy blessings upon our parents, our teachers, and our country. Super simple. But what we did with the kids was we gave them a sense of safety, right? Somebody great was actually watching over them. And we also gave them a sense of gratitude, right? And we took that prayer out of school, and now they're getting kids to meditate and have prayer and great gratitude journals. And gratitude is actually really good. It releases all these oxytocin, the feel-good hormones. So when we took kids out of school, and this goes back to your thinking too, about once we took this kids out of school, God out of school, when we take God out, or this transcendent
I think it would be good to take the kids out of school, actually.
That's happening too. Anyway.
It's a Freudian slip, but we'll talk about psychology in a little bit.
Our school is okay, thank goodness. No mandates, thank goodness. But when we took God out of the school, we took this prayer, then all of a sudden we left kids to compare themselves to others. We left them to focus so much and obsess about their own identity, which is a bad thing. When we taught them to understand good and evil, the yardstick would be people in front of them or things. And groups. And so then we saw this creation of safe places because, well, you had to be saved from some evil outside of you because it didn't exist inside of you. And of course, these people have grown up. I think Helen touched on this a little bit, but, Jonathan Haidt wrote about this in his book, The Coddling of the American Mind, this safetyism culture. George Will called these bubble-wrapped children. Now they've grown up because Jonathan Haidt wrote about them. They were in college, 2010. Now they're in college, and now they're working in the workforce. Now they're in government, and now they're trying to create safe places everywhere, right? They want to be safe. We want to save people from eviction. We want to save people from unvaccinated. So we have this safetyism culture now, and it comes back from taking prayer out of school.
Well, look, let me not go on that topic, but let me try taking this in a slightly different dimension where there is obviously one way where you can describe Marxism or wokeism as somehow, reductionist and materialist. But I think we should also think of them as some ways, ideological or spiritual or something like this. And one of the ways I always think of this is that in July of 1969, we landed on the moon, and then 3 weeks later we had Woodstock. And with the benefit of hindsight, that's when technology stopped and progress slowed down, and the hippies took over the country. And the shift, and I think there was a way in which the sort of technical scientific impetus. There was something about the Apollo space mission that was probably somehow more materialistic. It was about rockets and fuel and getting the calculations right, not making any mistakes, and making sure there was enough oxygen in the spacesuit. And there was something about the hippies that was actually, this weirdly anti-materialist move. Or to put it in another dimension, it was a shift from exteriority to interiority, and that. I think there's sort of all these different ways that we've moved into ourselves in the last 50 years, and it's certainly true of yoga and meditation, and there's probably a version, there probably are all kinds of psychological, psychopharmacological, psychedelic, parapsychological types of interventions. The line I always like to quote is from Milton's Paradise Lost. It's the mind is its own place, and of itself can make a hell of heaven and a heaven of hell. And this is it's what Satan says when he gets sent from heaven to hell. It doesn't matter. It's just a state of mind. And then probably the thing that's that one should ask is that actually true? To what extent is the mind its own place, and to what extent is the external reality the much more important thing. And I tend to think there's something about, the sort of shift to interiority as something that's, been sort of both overrated, unhealthy, crazy in all these ways. I had a set of conversations with Jordan Peterson a few years ago where I always thought he was way too psychological, and it was, or maybe you can, maybe a way to talk about psychology is that psychology was developed in the early 20th century as how do we, if you don't have external things, if you don't, maybe an external thing is God or religion or something like that. If you don't have external things that encourage people to be good, how do you create internal mechanisms to make people good, or to for people to control themselves or to be controlled? And I think of psychology as something like that, and then we can get into a much longer discussion. Does it work at all, or if it works, is it more good than bad? And I think it's sort of like an interesting, complicated history where it probably always gets advertised as personal transformation. You go see a psychologist, and it will be a way for you to personally transform yourself. So you don't believe in religion anymore, but the psychologist will do this. And then I think this is sort of like maybe a common pattern would be that after years of therapy, you're just really exhausted. You're sick of spending all this time, wasting all this money. You kind of dislike your therapist. You're bored with them. And it sort of crashes from self-transformation into self-acceptance. And after years and years of therapy or psychedelic drugs or whatever, the equivalent or meditation or yoga or breathing exercises, after years of this, you conclude everything's fine and you don't need to change at all. And maybe that's true, but it's just very odd, where the marketing was 180 degrees the opposite of what ultimately happens. And then, so I think psychology is another version of this, and there's probably a whole set of phenomena like this that I would loosely wrap under the shift from exteriority to interiority. And again, there's some version of interiority that is maybe good. I think we've gone way too far.